Hello, everybody. First of all, very, very grateful to have been invited to speak. Probably like a lot of you, when somebody asks you to do something like this, your first reaction, because Luke was a dear friend, I said yes, and then 5 minutes later, you say, why the hell did I say yes to that? Because, you know, speaking in public is never easy. But then when I actually started to reflect on one of my daily walks, I was very moved because what Luca's invitation and the Lord's invitation really enabled me to do was to really look clearly at what's happened over these last couple of months in a way which possibly I wouldn't have done if he hadn't asked me. So that's the first thing I'm really grateful for, and that's linked to what I'm going to say afterwards, actually. So who am I? I am a music teacher, as Luca said. I live in London. I live in a house of consecrated people. So there's 5 of us. We live together and we give our life working, but in the working world, but we live a life of prayer and follow a rule. And yeah, I've been working in the same school for 20 years. So I've been there for quite a while. So let's first question. So what am I learning? And I think the main thing I'm learning, and it might seem kind of a bit obvious, but hopefully I'll explain why it's not, is my absolute need of dependency, that I depend. In fact, I would say I am so dependent, I am so needy that I'm not even capable of depending. That's something that's becoming clearer and clearer for me. You know, we all kind of recognize that we depend on God, we depend on friends, we're not self-sufficient. But then one thing that's clear for me is the gap between my statement and what I actually live. And during this period, there's been several moments where that's been really clear. But I can't say that without immediately saying another thing, which is the only reason why I can say that without being afraid, without being squashed, without being depressed by saying I'm so needy that I don't even manage to depend, is because there is another one who embraces me. It's really because in the moment that I'm embraced, all of that need and neediness becomes apparent, but at the same time is embraced. It's a beautiful thing. It's a moving thing. It's a thing where you say, I want to depend. I want to be needy because I want to be like this. And I'll just give you a couple of simple examples of how that was borne out. So lockdown was going all right for me. I wasn't struggling terribly. I wasn't bored. I wasn't scared. I wasn't, I had plenty of work to do and so on. And things were coasting along quite nicely. We'd been following the Pope and stuff. But at a certain point, when I would have said, I'm doing all right, I'm fine, I followed Mass with Don Luca. And he said in his homily on that day, that the way in which the mentality of the world, if we think that the mentality of the world doesn't affect us, we make a mistake. And that was already something which kind of made me sit up. You're thinking, in what way is that affecting me now? And then the next day, very next day in the morning, we followed the Mass from the Pope. And he was talking about the missionary aspect of Christianity and how Christianity is something that takes us, that mission is not a project, it's not a proselytism, it's a passion which is born from a relationship. And immediately in those words, and in that embrace from the Pope as well, because that's the other thing. When you hear something from somebody like the Pope, it's not a telling off. It's an embrace that reawakens exactly that in me. So immediately I became aware that I was different. That actually, those days before that I'd been living, okay, I was actually living quite flat without realizing it. So that's why I say my neediness is so great, I don't even realize how to live my need. But there is a place, there is one who comes to me in a precise place with precise names, faces, moments, who embraces me constantly. So that for me is the prayer, greater desire that's come out of this time, is to live that more, to put myself more in that place. The church, it's clear, the church in all its aspects, the mass, these moments, the friendship, the moments of prayer, the moments of reflection, readings, reading people's witnesses, reading suggested books, suggested things, all those ways in which the Lord has created a privileged space and a privileged place for his encounter with me, for his embrace with me. So that's, if you like, it summarizes what I've been learning during this period. And then how does that affect my work? So I teach music, and I also have a responsibility in chaplaincy, because it's a Catholic school I work in. And what I would immediately say is, I notice an absolutely clear difference in this time when I move in my work, because I have to, because I'm a teacher, like every other teacher, we've got to do our bit, or whether I move because I am moved. Father Giussani, in his commentary on the Rosary, has a beautiful commentary on the second mystery of the Visitation, where he says charity is that moved giving of life. He says, Our Lady, she ran to, in the Gospel it describes how she ran, she hurried to Our Lady on the Visitation, to Elizabeth on the Visitation, because she was full of what had happened to her. And he says, this is what happens. The encounter with the Lord, that we call faith, generates that moved giving of yourself. And Saint Therese would say, when I'm charitable, I'm only charitable when Christ acts in me. And it's exactly what I found, that when I am moved by what's happened, whether it's been something the Pope said at Mass, whether it's been an encounter, whether it's been something that somebody said, a beautiful thing that's happened, those days, those moments in which I really experienced the embrace of the Lord, I find myself different in front of my work. And I found myself, I suppose I'd summarize it with a new creativity, a new affection, a new patience. I guess what we might call a hundredfold in those moments. And I'll just give you three simple examples. 3 times this has happened to me, and it isn't my constant experience. There are many days of the opposite, again, where I go back into that kind of neediness without knowing my need. But I'll tell you these particular 3 events. So right at the beginning of the lockdown, I went to confession, the last day that you could get confession. So we finished school on the Friday. On the Saturday, I managed to get confession. I was kind of sitting there thinking, it'd be nice to do something for the kids. It'd be nice to have them offer something chaplaincy-wise, some moment of reflection, whatever. But I kind of was locked into my own, they won't listen to me. They're not going to be bothered listening to me. What can I say? Again, very much inward, turned on myself, my capacity, whatever. The moment I came out of the confession, I was a different person. And I was full of, I want to share what the beauty that embraces me. And then whoever listens and whoever it helps, is God will do that. But I was a different person. I was moved. And then for the next 2 weeks, I did these little daily reflections, little videos and things up to Easter. Just sharing my experience. And again, it was a help for me because it encouraged me also to be more attentive to my experience of each day. But that was a clear example for me of a new creativity, a new affection that was born from the embrace of the Lord in that precise confession that changed me. Another little thing that struck me was, so when we started doing online lessons with the kids, we created this this thing we in our school, we're very big on behavior and managing behavior and all this kind of stuff. So we created this inadequate distance learning point. So if a child didn't do their distance learning, they got a point, a behavior point. And the kids don't really like the behavior points. They're quite serious. So we got to the end of the first week and I looked and I was horrified. There were thousands of inadequate learning points. More than in 1 week, more than a month. And I hadn't given one. I hadn't given a single one. And then I realized that actually what I'd done is all the children who hadn't completed their homework, whatever, I'd contacted them. So I'd send an email or I'd contacted their parents to find out if there was a problem. If they had, if their computer, or had access to computers, if they didn't understand the work, if they didn't get the emails, all this kind of stuff. Because for me, I was thinking about them. I was thinking about how are they living in this time? They're suddenly being stuck at home with the fear that's surrounding them and everything else. So what mattered to me was a relationship with them. And that's, again, was something that surprised me when I realized that I had actually moved in a different way. And then the third thing that we did, or that I want to talk about, is we decided to put all the instrument lessons, with 80 children learning musical instruments, we decided to put them all online, which was a huge amount of work. Crazy things, like I ended up doing IT support on the days that we started, which I'm no expert in IT, but kind of taking phone calls from parents, taking phone calls from kids, taking phone calls from staff, trying to fix their Zoom from home, trying to sort the stuff out so they could make it work. So it was kind of crazy amount of work, but again, with an energy which didn't come from myself. It was really born of a passion for those kids, for the fact that music is a beautiful way that they could spend their time. It's a beautiful way in which we meet the Lord and can be open to the Lord. And it wasn't heavy. I had to spend my time doing kind of banal stuff, just sitting there listening, picking up phone calls and responding to emails for 8 hours a day. But it wasn't heavy. And again, that's something that surprised me. There's something that was born of this affection that is born from the embrace of the Lord in my life. And I can also say the days when I was absolutely frustrated and absolutely couldn't wait to get, finished and do my own thing, because I wasn't full of the Lord. I was starting from my own idea, my own strength. So yeah, I mean that's really what I've learned and what I've brought, and I realize how you touch other people is mysterious. I offer what I do. I mean, there's a lovely little prayer of night prayer of the church, one of the days of the week, that says, "May the work we have done today be sown for an eternal harvest." It really moves me. And I kept that in mind a lot, just in simple stuff that you do at distance online, trying to reach the kids, trying to respond to their questions, their difficulties, that what we do is so much greater than just the little thing we do. That within the instant, lived with the Lord, there is an eternal dimension. There's an eternal dimension in the relationships we're building, an eternal dimension which goes much deeper than we can possibly see. But it's happening first and foremost because of your own gladness. I think that's the first fruit I see of this is my gladness. When I live like that, I get to the end of the day and I'm tired, but I'm happy. I'm glad. When I don't live like that, I'm frustrated and I'm back where in that neediness that I don't even recognize as neediness. And then in the others, you see little glimpses. The Lord allows you little glimpses, but you don't even know how far you're reaching. Somebody who drops an email, a kid, and who says, "Sir, how are you? I haven't heard from you for a couple of days," or a parent that says, "Thank you very much for this, thank you very much for that," or a colleague that blossoms because you help them out for 5 hours trying to sort out their problem with the technology, and then you see how they're working with a passion as well. So all these little ways in which you see the fruits of what the Lord brings about in my life when I let him in. Simple as that. It's a difficult one to answer, obviously, because you never know where you're reaching. As I said, I think what I've realized as the years go on is the first problem is always me. If I'm full of my faith, if it's something that moves me, it's the only thing that I can do anything about, in a sense. I can't. I can try and be creative and whatever, make things easier, communicate things to them. But ultimately, if I'm, like St. Paul says, if I'm an empty gong and I'm not full of love, nothing communicates. But I have to say that every now and again, the Lord gives, it's like if like anything in life, if we work in a complete and utter desert, it's tough. And the Lord definitely gives moments where he kind of shows you a little glimpse that says, keep going, keep going. You know, it might be a conversation with a child, or it might a parent. So one of the parents I spoke to about a child's singing lesson, she just chucked in and said, "Oh, by the way, Mr. Morgan, thank you very much for your reflections. I'm finding them really useful." You know, and you don't expect it. You don't know whether it's going to arrive, but they come in different ways. Starting from the other side, I think the danger for an RE teacher, and I've taught a bit of RE, is that because you're talking about God, you think it's easy. Whereas we're always talking about, what we're really talking about is the deep encounter of the human heart with the heart of the divine, which never passes through just words. And if I think about my experience from when I was a kid, the one thing in from my teenage years onwards that was clearly an encounter for me with the divine was music. I struggled as a teenager. I had big existential questions that I didn't really know what the heck was going on. But I perceived friends in the great composers more than anybody else. Something in their music was saying, yes, I live the same. So that's what I try and share with them. There is this mysterious depth in music which is divine, which opens you to God, to the presence of the divine in the world.